Good evening. How are we this evening? Apologies about last week. It all kind of went to mess a little bit. It just went to pot. So anyway, back on track. Let's just not talk about last week. But all good this week. Well, say that. Monday got off to an interesting start. Have you ever had to rescue a muntjac deer from stuck inside a fence? Out walking the dogs in the morning, and Marvin ran off because he heard this weird noise, and when I got there it was a muntjac deer with its head stuck in the fence. They're very, very strong. I'm trying to manipulate it, so ended up having to phone Paul to bring something to get it out of the fence. He arrived. Unfortunately, what he brought wasn't strong enough, but thankfully one of the guys, lovely guys from Barham, had heard what was going on, grabbed an angle grinder, and we managed to get said deer out of the fence. He ran off, shaken but not stirred, and yes, it all ended well. But I'm like, oh, what a way to start Monday morning. But all's well now. So haven't seen him since, but have seen hoof prints, fresh hoof prints, so bless him, he's okay. So that was our Monday morning. But we're here, we've made it to Wednesday. And hello, Marv. You all right, mate? Just recounting your adventures, my darling. You coming around here? So, yes. But good news is we are gradually getting caught up. Most of the stuff that people are waiting for has gone, hopefully already been delivered, with some more stuff going tomorrow, and then I should be caught up. But and last week's TV show got moved around for numerous reasons, but it's now on the 18th, which gives me a little bit of breathing space. So you're up to date. What are we going to do today? So we are going to be playing with this stamp set. Now this is one of the Butterfly Kisses stamp sets. So you may not have seen this one. This is called Far Away. And the reason I've chosen this one is it is going to be one of the ones featuring on the telly on the 18th. But I know we should be doing Christmas, but I did Christmas this afternoon. Done it. That's it. Christmas is done. I just thought this is a really nice one, and we have still got lots of the strut frames. These are the smaller ones, so I've added them to the website. You get 25 different sizes. This is the smaller one, and I just think stamps like this lend themselves to creating little pieces of artwork. So I was thinking, if you want to make calendars and things like that, you don't necessarily want Christmas stamps for that. So this is really pretty. And if anybody's, we had the pleasure of going to Prince Edward Islands last year, which is home of Anne of Green Gables. And I just thought this has got that lovely feel about it, with her looking wistfully off into the distance. Also got seagulls. Can't go wrong with seagulls. You could just use them on their own. And then you've got these lovely sort of scene building elements as well, and a couple of nice sentiments. The So Sorry You're Leaving is really nice, but then you've also got the Thinking of You, which is a really handy one. Happy Birthday and Bon Voyage, so lots of usable there. Right. Oh dear. Yes, it was very oh dear. So strong though, bless him. Did manage to take a small chunk out of my finger. That was the fence, not the deer. Right, so I have got a little list of a few things I want to share with you. This is a DL stamp set. Probably turn it that way. This is just so lovely, this one here. It's got that real sort of timeless feel to it. But I do think this has quite a vintagey feel, so I am going to go along the vintagey lines with what we're going to be doing with these. So there we go, stamps. Sepia tones, I said. Right, okay, I can get rid of that piece of paper for a minute. Let's just grab some card. So I've got some, oh, you feel weird. I'm going to go with a cream piece here. I don't know what that is. It's got a slight sheen to it. I'll use that in a minute. I just grabbed some card, wasn't really looking. All right, so who have I missed? Hello, Sue. hang on, I've got different things on. Right, okay. for a change, hi Kelly, hi Elsbeth, hi Sarah, hi Jean, hi Gail, hi Carol, hi Sue, hi Maxine. Right, I think that's covered everybody for now. Oh, sorry, a bit achy. And that's because loaded Paul. He's off, so he's currently in Bath, then he comes back tonight, and then we've already loaded the van. We've been a bit cheeky, we loaded both vans. So one van was loaded for today's job, and then we've already loaded the van that sets off tomorrow. Big van, goes up to Manchester. He stays up in Manchester overnight and does another job, so we've had stuff everywhere trying to sort out all these different vans. But it is the advantage of having two vans, is the fact that we can load him separately. Right, let's play with this. Now I'm going to be using one of the Adirondack, and it's rust, because I want a sepia tone. My only complaint with the Adirondacks, and I think it's amazing how even ink pads have evolved. So these are sort of traditional ink pads, quite old, but the lids were attached. So when you go to do how you would normally ink pad to stamp, you can't, because the lid gets in the way. So you have to take the stamp to the ink pad, which is a bit sort of not what we are used to doing. So I'm just going to do very simple, little bit of the boats there. That's the downside of these ink pads, is the fact that it's easy to miss a bit. So I am gonna leave that. I might cut it out and decoupage it in a minute, but I do want all of it at the moment. It's amazing how you have an ink pad and you used to use it for years, and then you go to use it now and it's like, hang on, there's something a bit different about it, and it takes you a second to realise what's different. So I'm going to add a little bit of, actually I could have done that on there, that's fine. And we'll add the seagulls in the sky. I'm keeping it very simple here, and I'm just doing it in the one colour. Okay, so you could do this with distress inks. I've got another seagull there. I'm not going to do any words or anything. Another seagull there, he's after the chips. Right, so keeping it very, very simple. But what I've got now is my water brush, and I just want to very gently ease some of that colour out. Not a huge amount, I just want to give this like a sepia tone, which is why I've used the same ink pad, just pulling some of the colour out of the stamped image. Also, by using the cream card, that helps with this, pulling that around. I don't want to flood it with too much water, because I don't want to take away those lovely lines. But I just, which is why a water brush is good, because you just don't squeeze it basically. And you can almost do shading by pulling more colour in. Okay, just, so there's some seagulls in the distance. Okay, just very gently. So I'm not squeezing my water brush at all here, so I'm not pulling out too much water. But can you see it's just adding that sort of slightly delicate colour. Then I've squeezed my acrylic block onto the ink pad, so again I'm picking up some of that colour, just so that I can start to add a little bit more colour. Just trying not to overpower. If you do find that you're overpowering it a little bit, use the water to pull it about. Just adding some, just very simply, just to give it that vintagey feel. See there, I feel I put too much colour down. So what I'm going to do is going to blob and dab and pull a bit of that away. Right, get it nice and watery, just to start adding almost like clouds there, but not introducing any other colour. So as tempting as it is to go, well, that's clouds, that's sky, I'm going to add in some blue. We want this to have that sepia feel of a vintage photograph. And then just really sort of giving it a wishy-washy feel. And there you've got your little vintage picture, which you could pop into a frame. But I'm going to tear the edges to again give it a more weathered vintage feel. Going to ink the edges as well in a minute, and I might even give it a little bit of a scrumple to make it look like it's been a photo that's been in someone's pocket for a good few years. Yeah, but I'd lose that, Gail. If I unclipped my lid, I would definitely lose it or break the hinge because I'm so heavy-handed. But yes, they do unclip, but that's just asking for trouble with me. But isn't it amazing how, you know, they have evolved over time? And if you look now, nearly all ink pads are the same sort of style with the completely separate lift-off lid. And there are some ink pads, because Adirondack ink was the same that was in the Big and Juicy ink pads. For anybody that remembers those. They were fabulous, lovely ink in them, because I say it's the same as the Adirondack. But they just had issues, and the biggest issue was if they got tipped on their side during transportation, all the ink flowed because they had different colours within the same ink pad. And there was many a box of those opened, and you could just tell because all the colour had pooled. Right, I'm going to just scrumple. Now, scrumpling is where you don't screw it up completely, you just bend it a little bit. So just gives it a little bit of a broken up feel. And then with the same sponge that I've just inked the edges with, but without adding any more, I'm just gonna run that across a little bit just to give it a little bit more of an aged look. So there you go, very simply using one ink pad to give it that sepia feel. Okay, so next, right, I want a bit of white card this time. I'm going to go with that. I'm not convinced about this white card. I don't know where I picked it up from. So I just want 5x7. I need an aperture cutting. And I didn't think to do it in advance. So I've just very simply done it using my trimmer there. Okay, so just snipping out the corners. So this could be one of your frames, but I want this in white at the moment. Or you could cut this with a die. But I tell you what you do, make sure you've not got ink on your fingers. Right, so there's our white little frame. There's our scene. And there's our scraps, which we're going to use in a second. Right, first of all, let's create a little bit of interest going on in the background there. So seagull off of there, and clean off a bit of that, and then we're just gonna bit of green, bit of blue, we're going to spritz this with some water, and we're going to blob, 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 blob. Not sure we've, yeah, we've got enough there. A little bit more water onto that, just to blend the colours a little bit more. Okay, let me just dry that a little bit. So just keeping it very, very simple, because I'm wanting this to be like almost like a misty, looking out into the morning. Okay. Right, so that's going to go over like that probably, and I'll trim it down in a minute. So let's do a little bit of scenery here. So we're going to keep it nice and simple with those lovely boats. I'm going to come in with my VersaFine Clair this time because I want them to be a bit crisper. So we're going to have them right in the middle. Okay, and then I've got a brown pencil. Yes, I have. So just adding a splash of colour to the boats here. Now I'm going with quite a sort of a traditional brown here, but you could mix this up to be almost Caribbean feeling, or you know, the nice boats on the beach in the Canaries or somewhere like that. By doing these in bright colours, you'd straight away give it a warmer feel than this. This is a beach. This is this is way down the British coast, September, October time. Things ain't exactly warm. So just adding a little bit of more colour here, but I'm not going crazy. If you love your painting in and your colouring, by all means you can do that. But for this, I'm just keeping it fairly simple. Okay, and if I want to extend that out a little bit, you have got this stamp here, which is like a ramshackle, broken down, fancy bit, which might be quite nice to have it coming off there. I'll colour it in a minute. See, so it's just finished, just pulling that scene across a little bit there. And we'll have another little bit of it here. And although that's exactly the same stamp, because we're not going to have all of it in our picture, it doesn't look like it's the same stamp. Probably going to go about there. Thirds. Remember, thirds are your... Okay, let's add a little bit of... So, and of course, if you've got more than one brown pencil crayon, that would be a lot easier. But you know the idea. But on the same note, you don't have to have, it can still look. Right, so that's our basic scene there that's going to go like that. And you could just leave it like that and it would be really lovely. But I want to introduce our lovely lassie to this. I don't know whether I... Do you know, we might want... Let's have a look. Because that would look nice in a proper strut frame. But for now, we're going to keep it with that one. Right, so... Remember those scraps we kept? Because we are going to stamp our lass onto the piece of scrap, the bit that got cut out of the middle. Stamping her again in the same VersaFine, which is Fallen Leaves, probably. It is, yeah. I do like I've said it before, I do like the lack of harshness when you use brown instead of black. And then I'm not going to colour her in. You could if you wanted to, but what I am going to do is I'm going to cut her out. And here I can have a little bit of artistic license and I can cut the grass. Okay, going round her puffy dress. Because I want to create a little sense of dimension, but flat dimension. I've probably said that term before and I know it's an oxymoron, but it's going to create the illusion of she is stood in the foreground looking off into the distance just by using that simple layer of the frame. Now I could have stamped her and then cut the aperture out around her, and you've seen me do that before, but that's always a little bit trickier. Now, she has got, that's bad English, she has got 2 legs and they have got a gap in between them that we don't want to have that white. So what I've done is along the grass line there, I have cut right through. Then I can remove the what is in decoupage terms the landlocked part, and then when I glue it back down I push the legs back together and you see how that element has gone, and I'm not having to do any fancy cutting. I can do the same up here because it will look more effective if we can see the scene through the gaps. And again up here by her arm, and if you follow the line of the stamp rather than just cut randomly like across her arm, if you follow the line of the stamp, when you push it back together it's less obvious that you've cut there. And then this would go onto there and she's looking out across that scene. So the only thing I would do now is glue this on and then trim the outside so that you can't see the overhang, because that spoils the illusion. Okay, so I think about like that. Trim off the excess here. There we go. Though there isn't a balloon for her, because it's just, because the set is called Far Away, it's all about looking off into the distance. But I'm sure you could fashion one with another stamp or a die cut. But I mean, look just how simple that is. So even if you're, the frames always, because it takes away the edge, just glue her onto there. You could raise her up a tiny bit with foam pad. The word was there, I could see it, just couldn't get my mouse to. So she's looking off into the distance. But that could also be a photo. If you've got a photo of the beach, you could add her to a photo frame. And look just how simple she looks there, just looking out. And because she's got the no colour, you're still drawn to her, and then that's just in the distance there. Okay, right. Let's do another oldie but a goodie. So I am going to start with, I want a longish piece of Please note how clean the trimmer still is. I'm hoping you're spotting this. It's all lovely and still clean. Christmas shopping. You're very organised. Sort of December has descended onto me a bit too pronto. Although I am taking mother-in-law to the garden centre next Wednesday afternoon to go and see all the Christmas decorations. Because it's a little bit bad. I went to see it last Wednesday. Not a long story, but it was very dark. They had a power cut. Right, oldie but a goodie. So I am going to take my ramshackle fence and I'm going to take some walnut stain and some forest moss. And I'm going to do forest moss at the bottom half, my walnut stain at the top half, slightly overlapping them just to make sure that the stamp is completely covered. And then we do the magic puff and we breathe on it, which adds a little bit of moisture back to the ink, and you get this beautiful gradient of colour. So you get green grass and you get your brown fence. I don't know if it is a fence, but it makes me think of like the sand dunes where the fences. And I'm going to do the same with the boats. So I'm going to do plenty of walnut stain at the top, and then where you've got the bits of green for the grass, I'm just wondering, I'm also going to go with a bit of crushed olive in between, because obviously these are sort of beached boats, so you're thinking more sort of sand duney. It's less harsh than spritzing it with water, but it's enough to bring the ink back to life, so you're getting those lovely grade of colours. And you see, adding that sort of crushed olive just gives that beachy feel. And then we're going to do the last little bit at the end here, which is a little bit more of a complicated one. This is our mooring point with a little life buoy. So let's get the brown of our walnut stain, our little bit of mown lawn along the bottom there. If you've got distress markers, this is a lot easier, but you can do it with the ink pads. And then I've got barn door. I'm just using the corner just to concentrate where that life buoy is. Okay. Magic puff. You can see, just using the corner of the barn door there, how that's made that buoy pop out, and you've got a lovely grade of colour there without having to do anything fancy. Again, just frame that off. Maybe add a wash of colour if you wanted to, like we could add a little bit of sky, but I don't want it to be too harsh, because these are quite crisp. In fact, I am going to leave it. What I could do, not the best cutting. Awful cutting. I was just thinking, because I want maybe to have some sky to this, I'm going to tear the bottom and then for the sky I could use just blue paper, but I think it's going to look kind of cool to create a little bit of sky. Just, sorry, squeaky card. Don't know if I like that. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. So if I didn't, I'd just cut that straight and have a long, thin image. But I do love this. I think because it's two different sort of styles, solid colour, and if you had a cloud stamp and you could do the same idea with the clouds, that would look really nice. But this idea of just then huffing onto it so that it just reactivates the ink. Christine, that's the only Distress Oxide I own. I know, yeah. That's literally the only Distress Oxide in the world I have. I love my Distress inks and I have just never got into the Distress Oxides. Is that wrong? Maybe I will. Maybe that's what I need to ask Santa for. But no, I love my Distress inks. So I just carry on using those. Yeah, I suppose everybody's different, but I haven't felt the need to go out and grab. I did treat myself to some more VersaFine Clairs because I wanted better, crisper stamping when I'm using the detailed stamps. And although Distress inks are good for stamping, you don't get the same crispness you get with the VersaFine Clair. So I suppose that's the only I'm odd maybe. Right, hang on. Where's the bit I cut off that? I was going to use it to do some clouds. No. Odd. Strange. No, I want you for something else. Keep picking this piece of paper up and then I remembered it's a pattern piece of paper that I'd got a plan for. Wasn't the bit I was... No, I'm going to have to cut another one. Oh, there it is. So I've got the same colour ink here and I'm just going to build up very subtle, sort of cloudy, water, whatever you want it to be, layers. By using the same colour and building it up, you can still get tone without having to go crazy. I was just wondering if that looked better, but no. So now I'm going to stamp along the front there, just using our boats. You can't get on with them. Yeah, the VersaFine, I think because I've got such a lot of Distress inks, it seemed my money was better spent on getting the VersaFine Clairs because they are different. They do. I am welcome people to try and convert me. By the way, I'm a hard sell. But I just, yeah, I don't know. I just, when you've got something that you're happy with and you enjoy using, I don't think you necessarily need to rush out and get something else. So I'd rather get something like the VersaFine Clairs. So I'm going for a very different look on this one. So I'm going with colouring in my boat in blue, different blue, because I'm just thinking of those lovely fishing boats in the little ports on sunny days. It's been sunny today, just not particularly warm. bit of green. So although this is a very traditional, realistic stamp, you can still go a little bit abstract with the back. Should have done white stripes, shouldn't I? Won't go over the wax crown. But yeah, little white stripes along the boats. And then I'm going to frame that off. I'll do it in a second. Right, bear with me. Bear with me. So I'm going to trim that and that. And then I'm going to take a section off the end here. And I'm going to take off the same section off the end there. Remembering which way around these go. But I do need to trim that down. And if I trim them both together, right, kind of like that. Yeah, I think everybody has their own needs, likes, dislikes, you know. But it's finding one that works for you. But also, you know, don't be afraid. Just because the world and his wife's got distress oxides doesn't mean you have to have distress oxides if they're not going to work for you. I'm going to put that on that one. And I'm going to put that on that one, and I'm going to leave them not coloured in because I think that just, I can't remember, there used to be like Christmas cards where the image was coloured in and then there'd just be like little, I don't know if I want them the other way around actually, no. So a triptych there just gives it a little bit of it. So you've broken up your panels. You could have just left them brown and white, blue and white, and then that's framing that off. But by adding just a little bit of interest, not coloured in, so the eye is still drawn to the centre, but it just gives a little bit more interest, a little bit more oomph. So that's another nice way of using it. Creating a bigger image, but you don't have to have it as a, if you're not happy about building up a scene, you don't have to, you can just create the illusion of it by using panels. Right, so that was not on my list. Multicolour, what are we doing for time? Fine. Right. Let's do, so similar to what we started with, let's just clean that off a minute. So, oh no, changed my mind, hang on. Because I can do that. And then a little bit of that down there just to give a bit more warmth, then that there, get a piece of card ready, by putting it over the card there I can see if there's any places that needs a little bit more colour. And then I'm also going to just add a hint of walnut stain down there. Right, I'm happy with that. Going to spritz it with some water. proud of you all for finding this ink pad that works for you and making the most of them. So I'm going to just really, so there, apply a little bit more pressure. Let the colours start to do their, that's it. You can actually manipulate this so that you get a nice flow going. Then lift it up. And as tempting as it is to dab, don't dab. Take the corner of your kitchen towel and suck it up, because then you're not going to lose too much of the colour or add too much texture. If you can let it dry naturally, if it's pooling too much, dry your acrylic block off and then put it back down again, and you can almost sort of spread it about a little bit. Okay, once you've spread most of it about, then you can come in and dab, but we've not lost too much colour there. We have now got a fabulous watery, beautiful watery, watercolory background. I am going to dry this. So even that little hint of walnut stain there has just changed the colour. Okay. Now, I'm going to come in with this ramshackle fence. And I'm just going to do it right in the corner there. I know it's gone out of my panel a little bit. And I wobbled a bit as well. It's unlike me. Well, not really. I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to add the seagulls. And I think that is actually all I'm going to add to that one. I don't want too much. I really love that background. So add the seagulls coming up there. Let it all dry a little bit. I'm going to blot it actually. Do I want the boat there? No, I don't think I do actually. But I might use a bit of that. Right, this is where it gets a little bit dodgier, because I want the grassy bit of this. So I'm going to ink up just the bottom part, then dab off the sort of main fence posts. And then it's just continued the grassy bit there. Didn't wipe it off brilliantly, but you get the idea. But we could distract that with a little panel in a second. But it's just got that very nice, simple scene to it. So just to hide that where I didn't wipe those off enough, so we never panic. Well, we can mildly panic. So, thinking of you. Just tear around it, because I don't want it to be too perfectly crisp. And that can go there like that, hides that, and you've got a very simple watercolour effect background there with your detail on, nice, summer, lovely. There's a lot of late people today. You're all right, don't worry. And you can remember, you can watch it back. They're all up on YouTube. I will at some point learn how to go to YouTube as well. Right. So we've got, you know, it's very simple adding that colour to it. But I think also that would be really, let's give me an idea. 1 second, we've had an idea. Right, I'm going to do this as a card. Right, I want, yeah, that'll do. I need a scrap of paper. I had loads of paper this afternoon. I also need pencil. Hello, I had a pencil earlier. Right, it'll have to be a coloured pencil, not ideal. Right, here we go. So, can't find my knife, so I'm going to do this a bit naughty. Oh look, loads of paper. That clatter, by the way, was all the paper falling out from the shelf underneath. Right, I need an aperture. So I'm just going to cut this out of here. Like so. Pop that down, and then I am going to, this would be better out of a firmer card, but it'll work. So I just want to have a perfect panel. Probably would have been easier to do it with masking tape, but so similar sort of colours to what I've just done. Blending the colours a little bit as you work. If I'd cut my aperture out of firmer stuff, this would be a little bit easier. That's fine. So we've got a panel of colour there. That was close. So now I'm going to come in with my ramshackle post again. I like that. I think it's because it's the one that it doesn't necessarily, although it does invoke sand dunes, it's not as seasidey as the others. And then I'm just going to stamp that in the corner like that. So again, so some of it's off, and just leave it as simple as that. You could add your birds to the top if you wanted. You could stop putting fingerprints all over it. You could, if you wanted to, black outline that. But I kind of just, again, like that idea of just pulling the eye in. Simple greeting down there if you wanted to. This would work with the boats. You could do 3 offset panels of colour. But it's just a very simple way of adding a splash of colour and just using a very, very simple scene stamp. And straight away your brain's going, oh, you know, is that overlooking the hills, you know, and that's a fallen down fence on a nice walk across the countryside, or is it at the top of the sand dunes? And you know, just beyond it is the beautiful beach that your dog's probably already legged it down to. But yeah, so there's simple ways of doing things. Right, let's go back to our little lady. And again, those simple panels, you could use her onto there. Right, I'm going to do a little tag just because it's going to be on brown paper here. So, nice and simple. We're just going to stamp her. And we'll do her in the bottom corner because I love that, you know, what is she looking away to? So simple. So, you know, on a journal page, that could be anything. What is she looking? Is she like, oh, you know, got a hand across her head, like, oh, woe is me. Is she shielding her eyes from the sun and looking into the distance? You know, there's all that kind of what, you know, what's going on. And that's where it's nice, the fact that it is such a simple stamp, but I love the fact it's not perfect. It's got that, you know, if you look carefully, you can see there's bits fallen down. It's had a life, that bit of fence. A bit like the bit earlier. Probably had a monk jack. Right, but what I want to do is I want to make her dress pop a little bit. Now why did I peel it off the acrylic block? I do apologise. Brain not great today. Has anybody been watching Marvellous Miniature Workshop with Sarah Cox? It's on BBC iPlayer. It is fabulous, but I'm just so tired yesterday. I fell asleep before finishing the episode. But it's lovely. It's really, really nice because it's interesting because you see the model making, plus you get some really nice sort of social history kind of stuff as well. So it's really interesting. And it's one of those programs that, although it's only half an hour, it's the right length of time because you get a lot into it and it is really interesting. But some of the model making is beautiful. Right. The stamps are called Far Away. If anybody's of a certain age, that your parents used to tell you go and play Far Away. It's one of the Butterfly Kisses set. So this is quite a busy patterned paper, and I want to give her a florally dress. And if I was to stamp her sort of there, that's too busy. But these little pretty pale blue flowers and the pale yellow ones would be sort of in tune with the style of her dress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover above, and I'm not worried about her head. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm just worried about her dress. So if I go about there, see how the dress has got the blue and just hints of colour. Now, seems a little bit wrong, but we are going to chop her head off. So we're going to just cut out her dress. So round, bit amber in there, off with her head. And we're going to chop her arms off as well. Seems a bit mean, but... Then round the dress. And then when we pop it on, see how she's got her beautiful floral dress. So even though it's a very small image and the paper has got largish flowers on it, you can still make it work without it looking ridiculous. And it just gives it that summer feel of her little dress. Just make sure you're lining it up. And she's looking off into the distance. You know, it's such a simple way of doing it, but it's a really nice way. And that is the Tiny Wee Books. Yeah, 3,000 of them she did. Although, did you also... Has anybody watched it on iPlayer so they've seen the other episodes? Because I don't want to spoil it for people. But yeah, I'm in awe. I need to go and visit these people. But how simple is that? But it just, again, makes it pop. And you could have that, you could do that same idea on this simple panel of colour. You know, there's all these sorts of things. And even though it is, when you first look at this stamp set, it almost has a slightly dated feel to it. But actually, when you start playing with it, there is so much. I mean, just the little row of boats is such a lovely one. And again, you know, the whole mail cards we don't necessarily like. But that stamp alone is just really lovely. Just, again, along a border. So it doesn't have to be like oldie worldy, watery colour. Our lovely little triptych. It's nothing. Our huffing on it so that you've got those colours. I mean, that just pops. That could be a simple little topper, just that square mounted up. In fact, that would look really nice, just a little square. No, it is beautiful. Yeah, you've got to, that's your homework, watch that programme. But yeah, that just as a little topper, you know, in those colours. Where we started, our little sepia aged one, our frame, well, we've got her looking over. There's all sorts of different things you can play with this stamp set, and it's just really, really sweet and gentle, I suppose. But I just thought for in the run up to Christmas, you know, it would make some nice calendar pieces. And I say, if you like your colouring in and your watercolouring and stuff, this is the ideal set for you. But if you're like me and not great at that, you can still make really, really good use of this. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be daunting. Just because it's a realistic stamp set doesn't mean that you can't do it in a more creative way to make it work for you. But just, you know, and that stamp set, that stamp would work with others. You know, I don't know, you've got a bird stamp, you've got, you know, anything, just that in the corner to ground it and give it a little bit of character. So that's today's stamp set. Right, hang on, buttons. Let's press some buttons. So yeah, so hope you've enjoyed that and a little play with that little stamp set there. Next week we'll do the other one, which is Madame Chic, which is another Butterfly Kisses one that's not been. So although I know we should probably be doing Christmassy stuff, but I think, you know, we've done quite a little bit of Christmas, so I think it'd be nice to do some other stuff. And for those people that are wanting to make gifts, yeah, it's all right making Christmas cards, but you also need to think of things for throughout the year. So Madame Chic is a beautiful sort of fashion-y set, but I couldn't do that one tonight because I'd forgotten to bring in my vintage sewing patterns, which will work really nicely with that. I will also hopefully at the weekend get a chance to stitch up my glycerin preserved leaves and be able to show you those next week. But in the meantime, have a lovely week. Honestly, my brain is just fried. I can't believe it's Wednesday already. I'm hoping by Friday I will have caught myself up. Probably, I'm hoping I'm not wishful thinking on that. But in the meantime, keep warm, keep out of mischief, and I will see you same time, same place next week. As it stands at the moment, have nothing on next week. That'll probably change, and the following week is chaos. But I have actually got a week where I'm hoping I will catch up on everything so I can do live properly, as always, next Wednesday. I will see you then. But other than that, no events. Wow. So hang on, let me find a button. Not that one. Yeah, that one. Right. In the meantime, take care. Those of you that have got advent calendars, what is it, tomorrow the 4th? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, you'll like the 4th. Right, I will see you next week. Take care.